Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to my kitchen. The recipe we're going to be making today is a family favorite, and it's a tradition. So I'm going to tell you a little story. Everybody loves Miss Ross's story time. Before we even get started with the cooking, we're making chocolate crackle cookies today. And this is a really weird year for a lot of reasons. So many reasons. But this week actually marks the 25th, that's a quarter century anniversary of also a very weird year. December 16th of 1995, when I was your age, I was 17, and I was a freshman in college. I was a little bit further along in life experience, but the age is the same. I found a lump in my leg, just below my left knee. And I didn't really think too much about it, and neither did my parents. You guys know I'm a klutz. I figured I'd just, gotten a goose egg, wailed at one. But it didn't go away. And so I went to the doctor when I came home from college for Christmas, for the holidays. And my doctor wasn't too concerned either, but he ordered an x-ray. And that x-ray had a shadow, and thereby starting a insane next 10 to 12 weeks, because the day before Christmas in 1995, I was told I had cancer. December 16th is the day I think of as the anniversary, because that was kind of the whole start of it. It was when I got the results from the x-ray, with the shadow, and then the dominoes started to fall. Well, why am I bringing this up with cookies? It's not to depress you, I promise. My grandmother, my mom's mom, was an amazing baker, and she, every Christmas, would make cookies all year long and freeze them, so that on Christmas we would see her and we'd have any kind of cookie you could possibly imagine. And as you might imagine, she was feeling pretty helpless. Most of my family was when I was diagnosed. So she called me up and said, we didn't have text messaging in those days. She called me up and asked me what my favorite cookies that she had ever made were. And I said chocolate crackle cookies. And she didn't know which cookies I was talking about, or at least she did a really good job pretending she didn't know. And the next day, I got a FedEx package at my door. And a few minutes later, my grandmother called and said, "Are these the right cookies?" And I had opened it up, and it was chocolate cookies. And I said, "No, these are amazing though, Grammy, but no, these aren't the right ones." And I tried to describe the ones. And she's like, "Oh, I'll have to check again." And the next day, and the next day, and for like 10 weeks, I got a package of chocolate cookies every day. And she never did find the right cookies. And whether that was intentional, because she wanted an excuse to keep making cookies, or whether that was because she really didn't know which ones I was talking about, I don't know. But when she passed away, I inherited all of her cookie recipes. In fact, I inherited all of her recipes. And I was sitting there one day flipping through them, and she'd been gone about a year by then, and it was coming up on Christmas. And I was flipping through those recipes, and darn it if I didn't find her chocolate crackle cookies recipe. And that's what we're going to make today. And it's not Christmas for me, the holiday season, whatever holiday you celebrate. And I celebrate all of them, because let's be real, we all need joy in our lives. Wherever we can find it, we make chocolate crackle cookies in my house. So I'm going to share that with you today. So here we go. All right, first we're going to start with a cup of all-purpose flour. I keep my flour in a Ziploc, as you know, because quite frankly, we go through a lot of flour. It's just easier. Because of the amount of space in these, I'm just going to put it right into my mixing bowl, and then I'll put the rest of my ingredients in my little mise en place. And that's just to save space. Just like with every time, I want to over scoop. I want to use the back of my rubber scraper, tap it a little bit, scrape it off so that it's nice and even. Not packed in, just even. The only one of those that we pack in is going to be our dry, our brown sugar, which we're not using today, but that's because that one has so much air because of the moisture that you need to pack it in to get that good equal measurement. All right, so now I need 1 cup of sugar. Anytime it says granulated sugar, anytime it says 4x or 6x sugar, anytime it says table sugar, or just plain old ordinary white sugar or sugar, it's all the same thing. It's this one. I need 1 cup. Again, I'm going to dip in. Please know that right before we started, I wiped down my counter and washed my hands. So we're all good to go. We had a great big lump in here. I'm not going to use the lump right now. To just break it up, it's because sugar is hydroponic, which means it pulls moisture out of the air and clumps. Not a big deal. You just need to shake. You just need to break it up. So I'm breaking it right now. All right, here we go. Just like with the flour, I want to tap. Use the back of my rubber scraper. Making a mess. See, that's why that whole making sure these cups are really small. Sugar, done my flour, get those out of the way. I'll clean up my space in just a second. I need my cocoa powder. I need 1/2 cup of unsweetened cocoa powder. Now, this is not the same as hot chocolate mix, okay? Hot chocolate mix is sweetened. It's going to have sugar. It's going to have probably a non-dairy creamer in it for texture and flavor. This is pure cocoa. It smells delicious. If you don't like dark chocolate runs to about 97% cocoa. This is 100%. So it's going to be super, super bitter all by itself. That's why we need that sugar, that whole cup of sugar. So I need 1/2 cup of unsweetened cocoa. Again, I'm going to over scoop, use the back of my rubber scraper, not a spatula, my rubber scraper. 1/2 cup. Smells delicious, looks delicious, it's bitter and not sweet at all, okay, because there's no sugar in it, it's just bitter. If you ever get around to looking up the history of chocolate, it's really interesting. It used to be thought of as a bitter food, and it wasn't until monks in Spain started adding sugar to it that it became sweet. It was always a bitter thing until that, and that was until the 1500s. So it's a relatively new thing for most of the world. 1 teaspoon of baking powder. Always make sure you use the right one, baking powder or baking soda. They are different. They do the same thing, but they function differently. So just always make sure you know which one you're using. Baking powder comes with this little can with this lip, so I can just use my measuring spoon. It's a 1/2 teaspoon, and I can use that to level it off. I don't need to use the back of my rubber scraper to do it. It comes with a little handy dandy lip. I need, and I did that wrong. I need 1 teaspoon. Now I could get back, I looked at the next line. I could dump this back in here and start over again. But if I know my fractions, if I did 1/2 teaspoon, if I do another 1/2 teaspoon, that is 1 full teaspoon. Because if I have 50 cents and you have 50 cents, together we have $1. So I can just use my fractions. Math. I need 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I have some kosher salt here. We don't use salt very much in my household. So I don't keep all around a lot of it, but I do have some for baking. We know that we need unsalted butter for this recipe, even if it didn't say it, because I'm adding salt. If it was salted butter, or if I only had salted butter in my refrigerator, then I could just leave out the salt. So it's just whichever one I'm using. I need 2 eggs lightly beaten. So when it says lightly beaten, I can do this 2 ways. I can take a fork, or I can take a whisk, okay? And I can beat it either way, it works the same. Based on the space I have in here, I'm gonna use the fork just for space saving tools. I crack one at a time, not on my head, making sure I don't get any of these shells. And I lightly beat it, meaning I don't have to, I'm not adding air, I'm just breaking up the yolk. If it said whip or heavily beaten, then you're adding air and stuff, or whisking. In this case, I'm just breaking up the yolk so that they spread easily. Okay, there we go. I'm gonna wash my hands, give me 1 second because of those eggs. And I'm going to reuse this paper towel to wipe down where I spilled that sugar. Spills happen, we just got to clean them up. I had a question the other day, do I always clean as I go when I'm not on camera? Absolutely. I can't stand the mess at the end of the day if I have not cleaned as I go. I do way too much cooking for that. And that's one of the things you learn in a restaurant is you've got to clean as you go. It's really good. And restaurants can teach you their recipes, they can teach you their way of doing things, but you have to have some skills to show them that you can do that. And one of those things is knowing your safety and sanitation, making sure you clean as you go. You do that, they'll teach you the rest. They're gonna be so excited because it's one of those things that doesn't come easily for a lot of people. 4 tablespoons unsalted butter. We know it's unsalted because we already had salt. I went ahead, cut my butter. Half a stick of butter is 4 tablespoons because 4 tablespoons is 1/4 cup, and 1 cup of butter is 2 sticks. I went ahead and put it in my microwave on lower power for just a few seconds, just to kind of soften it up because I didn't want to leave it at room temperature because I wanted to go ahead and get started with this. I need 1 teaspoon of vanilla. We always use all natural pure vanilla at my house, but at school we use the imitation because of cost. But it really does make a difference in your flavors. Why do you need vanilla? It helps to tone down that really intense bitter chocolate flavor. You wouldn't notice, you're not going to notice the vanilla flavor, but you'd notice if I left it out, you'd be like, something's not quite right here, and that's what that is. And then it says we need confectioner sugar. Well, we don't need it yet, and I'll get to why we don't need it yet in just a moment. Okay, and I'll tell you what we're going to be doing with it. So I have my mise en place, all of my ingredients, and now I'm going to get ready to go through the process. Directions: in a bowl, stir together flour, granulated sugar, cocoa, baking powder, salt, and then blend in the butter. So I'm going to put my mixer together. It is not plugged in yet. Why? Because I'm not ready to start using it yet. I don't want anybody's fingers in the way. Good safety. So now I'm going to put in, I've got my flour, and I'm using my recipe as a checkoff list. Granulated sugar, cocoa, baking powder, salt. I'm going to stir this together. So I'm going to put this down, and see all my ingredients. And really what we're doing at this point is just stirring. This is the lowest possible setting. It's breaking up any clumps in all of that, in all those dry ingredients, and spreading that cocoa through it. So it's just the very, very lowest setting. A lot of stand mixers actually have a stir setting, and it's just that very lowest setting. Now my next part of the instruction says to blend in the butter. So I have this handy dandy little hole here that I can just put my butter in. It does say to blend, so I am going to turn up the speed just a little bit. It'll make it a little harder for you to hear me. Once that is blended in, my next part is to stir in the egg and the vanilla until the mixture is completely blended. So I'm going to turn it back down to stir. Oh, wrong way. I'm going to use that hole in my lid, pour in my vanilla, and to pour in my egg. Now, just like with any other baked goods, I do not want to overmix this. I just want to blend it until it's all mixed together so that I don't get a hard, lumpy product. Give me just 1 second. I'm going to put these away because I clean as I go. I'm going to wash my hands. All right, I want to make sure that I scrape the sides of my paddle and that I scrape the sides of my pan, of my mixing bowl. And you'll notice this is a very dry dough. That's okay, because it sticks together and we're actually going to freeze it. I'm going to put it in just one more time very quickly just to make sure all the stuff that I just scraped off the sides gets blended in. Really fast. All right. The next ingredient, next instruction is to spread the dough in a thin layer in a bowl and freeze for 10 minutes until firm. So I'm going to use a metal bowl. You can use whatever bowl you want, but metal is going to conduct the cold, the chill, much faster and much more efficiently than a plastic bowl. And that means it'll freeze and set up much faster. If you're using a plastic bowl or you're putting it in a plastic bag, put it in for like for an hour or two, because you really want it to set up right. It smells like brownies, which is fantastic. This is one of those messy parts. Life is messy and so is cooking. And I'm going to just put all of this in here. Now, why does it say to use a thin layer? Because you want to make sure it sets up fast. You can make this dough ahead, leave it in the refrigerator or freezer for a couple hours or even a couple of days, and that's fine. It's not that big of a deal. But if you're making it all on the same day, and then you don't really have to worry about it. But if you're making it all on the same day, using this process, creating that thin layer, gets it to set up much faster. And really what we're doing is rehardening the butter. If you don't like getting messy, you can use some wax paper to do this and press it in with wax paper. But you can also just do it with your fingers. You want to make sure you get it off your fingers because you want as many cookies as possible. Because these are good. Yeah. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to put this in the freezer for about 10 minutes. While that's setting up, I'm going to reset my workstation and get my cookie pans ready and preheat my oven. And I'll see you in just a few moments. All right, welcome back. You can try to get the camera so you could see as much of this as possible. I needed that 1/4 cup. 4 tablespoons equals a 1/4 cup. Doesn't matter if it's butter or confectioner sugar. 4 tablespoons equals a 1/4 cup. So I was able to do a 1/4 cup of confectioner sugar, 10x sugar, powdered sugar, all the same thing. And I just over scooped it because it does say you need a little extra for your hands. So I just went ahead and just over scooped and didn't level off. Because what you're going to be doing is making the cookie balls, rolling them, and then putting them in the sugar and putting them on here. Now I've got my cookie tray. My oven is preheating behind me. You'll hear it beep in a few moments. And I've got 1, 2, 3 by 1, 2, 3, 4. And that means why I do that is so that they all end up equally spaced apart so that they cook evenly and they don't become one giant cookie. So what I'm doing now is just pinching off. I've got a small amount of the dough here. I've left the rest in the freezer just so that it continues to stay cold. I'm pinching off about the same amount of dough each time, rolling it in my hands. If my starts to stick to my fingers, I can just put that powdered sugar on my hands. That's why it's one of the things you're using it for, because it's fine. You want to use as little as possible that on your hands because you don't want it to get inside the cookie dough because it will dry the cookie dough out even more, and it's already a dry dough. So, and then notice now I can easily figure out how many cookies I need for this tray. And you can see on my right that there is a grated sheet. It's like little grids. And what that is for cooling your cookies. You don't want to have leave your cookies on the tray because after they're baked, because what will happen is the tray will keep the heat for a while and the cookies will keep baking. Okay, these are going to go in the oven and they're going to go for about 8 to 10 minutes. Just like I always say, don't depend on that timer. Just use it as a guide so you don't forget about your cookies. But if my oven is running hot or my oven is running cold, it's going to change the cooking time. I want to wipe my hands off before I touch my oven because I want cross-contamination. So I've got a bleach rag right here. It's at 386, just another minute or so, and it'll be ready to go. Since I only have one cookie tray prepared, I'm going to make sure I leave the rest of my cookie dough back in the fridge or freezer so that it doesn't get too warm. I can actually, and what I will do is actually freeze the rest of this dough in a Ziploc, push all the air out, put it in the freezer, and then when I want to make more cookies in a couple days, after these ones are gone, then I'll just take them out, let them warm up just a tad so that I can work with them again, and go ahead and roll them out. We are at 400 degrees. I'm going to open my oven door. Just like always, there's the beep. I use my pot holder, pull my rack all the way out. Cookies you definitely want to have in the middle racks if possible. Put my tray on. Gently push the whole thing back in using my glove. Close them up. I'm going to put the timer on for 8 minutes, but that's just to remind me. It's not actually going to change my cooking time. It's just to remind me so that I don't forget if something else happens, especially when you're in a home kitchen or you're easily distracted. That can be a major problem and you can easily forget about what's in your oven. Okay. In about 8 minutes, I'll pull these out and we'll have some cookies. All right, we've got just under a minute left on the timer. I've got the oven light on so I can look at them. If I had to adjust the time, it would be based on what the cookies look like now. So when I look at the cookies now, they have just a hint of glassiness, of shininess where they've cracked open. I want to make sure those are just very barely shiny because the shinier they are, the less cooked they are. It's still raw. You want to make sure that they're having sort of that dull coating. But once they've cracked open, and that's how they get their name, chocolate crackle cookie, you'll see what I mean in a second. You'll see that they're done. So I've got about 22 seconds left. We're just waiting. Always make sure if you turn the oven light on, make sure you turn it off. That is one of my biggest pet peeves. I have this problem all the time in my kitchens when we're in face-to-face. Is kids forget to turn that oven light off. It's not a real big deal, but it does drain the energy and the bulbs do eventually wear out. They're great bulbs, but they do eventually wear out and then you have to change them. And then it's just an expense we don't need. So I'm going to open my oven. You notice I turned it off before I did anything else. I even turned the oven light off. It's just good habit. I'm going to pull my tray out, my rack, pull my tray of cookies out. Make sure you always put it on something that can withstand the heat because it is at this case at 400 degrees. You'll notice underneath my cookie rack, my cooling rack, I have a little piece of parchment paper or wax paper. And that's just so that if any crumbs fall, it makes my cleanup easier. A little helpful hint. I use my turner. This is not a spatula, it's a turner, to go ahead and pull my cookies off gently, one at a time. Don't try and do them all at the same time. It's just, you're gonna end up with a mush of cookies, okay? Not that they're gonna taste bad, but they won't look as nice. And you can see as I'm doing that, how they've cracked open. And you can see the white powdered sugar with the dark chocolate color underneath. They've kind of got a brownie smell to them. They're going to be very soft and sort of molten heat right now. As they sit and cool, they'll get more and more firm, and that's because I used butter. If you like a soft, chewy cookie and you don't like a crunchy cookie, you can substitute vegetable fat, some Crisco. Oops. Miss Ross the klutz. You can substitute the vegetable shortening Crisco for it, for the butter, and you'll get a softer, chewier cookie. It's chemistry. It's craziness. And also, if somebody is allergic, is vegan, you'd want to use the not butter, because then these cookies then would be vegan. Well, egg. You'd have to use an egg substitute. Sorry. But you'd also have, if somebody has cholesterol issues, you could use an egg substitute, and there are lots of them out there. And then you can also, change out the butter, because animal byproducts have cholesterol, vegetables do not. So there are different ways to make these meet the criteria. And if you're in my food and nutrition class, you know that there are lots of different medical conditions and lots of personal decisions that can change how and what we eat. So you can adapt these cookies to meet some of those different requirements. Okay, have a wonderful afternoon. I'm gonna have one of Grandma's cookies. Have a great day, guys.